My daughter is unwell. Her mind is fractured. Tonight, to save her from herself, I am assuming immediate legal guardianship. My father's voice boomed through the microphone, freezing 300 of New York's wealthiest investors in their tracks. He didn't look at me. He just pointed a finger at my face while 4 security guards stepped out from the shadows, blocking the double doors. I am taking full control of her estate and her person. For her safety, there was no introduction. There was no negotiation. The trap had snapped shut, and the entire room was watching me drown. Before I tell you what he put in front of me to sign, and how I made him regret every single letter of his name, drop a comment. Where are you watching from tonight? Let's see how far this story travels. 1 hour before the security guards locked the doors, I walked into the Hamptons estate with a glass of champagne I didn't intend to drink. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money, a scent I had spent 10 years scrubbing off my skin. My father, Victor, had outdone himself. He hadn't just invited the elite of New York to witness his merger. He had invited them to witness my humiliation. Huge, floor-to-ceiling LED screens lined the ballroom walls. Displayed on them were my paintings' chaotic, violent swirls of black, red, and jagged white lines. They looked like the fever dreams of a madwoman. That was the point. Victor had framed them in gold and labeled the exhibit, The Fragmented Mind. It's tragic, really, my sister Taylor said, gliding up beside me. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car. Holding court with a group of potential investors, she pointed a manicured nail at the screen. Look at this mess, Val. It proves your brain is completely broken. Dad is a saint for putting up with your episodes. The group laughed. It was a polite, pitying sound that usually made me shrink. I took a sip of the champagne. I didn't shrink. It is messy, I agreed, my voice flat. They saw scribbles. They saw evidence of instability. But as I looked at the massive red spiral dominating the center screen, I didn't see art. I saw the flow of illegal cash through the Cayman Islands. The jagged black lines weren't brushstrokes. They were the exact routing paths of a human trafficking network operating out of the port of Newark. They thought they were looking at a painting. They were looking at a federal indictment map. My name is Valerie Stone. I am 29 years old. To my family, I am the disappointment, the failed artist, the unstable daughter who needs to be managed. But the world knows me as the chief federal prosecutor for the RICO division. I spent the last decade building a new name, a new face, and a conviction record that made cartel bosses sweat. I didn't come here tonight to reconcile. I came to close the biggest case of my career. Victor stood at the front of the room, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch perfectly. We just want to protect her assets, he told a senator, gesturing vaguely in my direction. She can't be trusted with money. She burns it. I watched him, feeling a cold, clinical satisfaction. He wasn't trying to protect my assets. He was trying to liquidate them. He needed a scapegoat for the millions he had embezzled. And a crazy daughter was the perfect cover. You're zoning out again, Taylor snapped, snapping her fingers in front of my face. Try to act normal for one night. Dad's merger depends on people thinking this family is stable. Don't embarrass us. I won't, I said. I'm just admiring the view. I wasn't looking at the guests. I was looking at the exits. I was counting the security detail. I was watching Senator Thorne, my boss and the director of the FBI, casually mingling near the bar in a tuxedo, waiting for my signal. They laughed at me then, treating me like a cracked doll that needed to be put back in its box. But they didn't know that the laughter was sealing their financial doom. Every insult they threw at me was just another line in the transcript I was building in my head. I finished my champagne and set the glass down on a passing tray. The gallery was open. It was time to start the show. My father's grip on my elbow was tight enough to bruise. He steered me away from the ballroom floor, smiling for the cameras while digging his thumb into my nerve endings. We slipped into a velvet-draped alcove near the kitchen service entrance, the only place in the building without eyes. As soon as the heavy curtain fell shut, the benevolent patriarch vanished. Victor's face went slack, cold, and predatory. Stop shaking, he commanded, though I was perfectly still. You're going to sign the papers tonight. No scenes. No tantrums. Why? I asked, keeping my voice small. I don't need a guardian, Dad. I pay my own bills. I live alone. Why are you doing this? He scoffed, adjusting his cufflinks. Because your brother is an idiot. He stepped closer, looming over me. Julian is in a hole, Valerie. Deep. $12 million to a syndicate in Macau. If he doesn't pay by Monday, they start sending pieces of him home in envelopes. So pay it, I said. You're merging a billion-dollar company tonight. Write a check. I can't, he hissed. The auditors are crawling through my accounts for the merger. If I move 12 million in cash, the deal collapses. I need a clean vessel. I need someone with spotless credit and no assets to trigger a flag. I need you. The plan was sickeningly simple. He would take guardianship, use my identity to secure emergency bridge loans against the family trust, pay off the cartel, and leave me with the debt. I would be bankrupt for life. Julian would be free to gamble again. You're destroying my life to save his reputation, I said. I'm your daughter, not collateral. Victor laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. He reached out and tapped my cheek, hard. You are confused about what you are, Valerie. He leaned in, his cologne smelling of musk and cruelty. You think you're a person? You're not. You are a limb. You are my arm. You are my hand. I created you. I fed you. I own the blood in your veins. His eyes were dead, void of any empathy. This was the truth he had hidden for years. If my arm gets gangrene, I cut it off to save the body. If my hand holds a pen, it writes what I tell it to write. It doesn't get to have an opinion. It doesn't get to have a brain. You exist because I allow it. And tonight, I need my hand to sign a check. If you refuse, I will break every bone in that hand until it complies. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a father. I saw a parasite. A man who believed his children were nothing more than spare parts to be harvested when he needed a transplant. The rage that had been burning in my gut for a decade turned into ice. I understand, I said softly. He straightened his tie, mistaking my clarity for submission. Good. Dr. Eris is waiting. Don't make me use the restraints. He turned and walked back toward the light of the party. I watched him go. He thought he had just broken a rebellious child. He didn't realize he had just given a federal prosecutor the motive to seek the maximum sentence. He viewed me as a limb. He forgot that hands are also used to pull triggers. The ballroom lights were blinding after the darkness of the alcove. Victor guided me back to the head table, his hand resting on my shoulder in a perfect pantomime of paternal concern. To the 300 guests watching, he was a loving father supporting a fragile daughter. To me, he was a jailer walking me to the gallows. He tapped a spoon against his glass again. The room hushed instantly. I have asked Dr. Aris to join us, Victor announced, gesturing to a man in a bespoke suit standing near the stage. As many of you know, Dr. Aris is a leading specialist in difficult cases. Dr. Aris stepped forward. He didn't look like a doctor. He looked like a hedge fund manager with a stethoscope. I knew him well, not as a patient, but as a suspect. His name was all over the encrypted files I had reviewed that morning. A man who specialized in prescribing heavy sedatives to wealthy inconveniences. Thank you, Victor, Aris said, his voice smooth and oily. He turned to the massive screen still displaying my art. We often see this kind of chaotic imagery in patients suffering from acute paranoid schizophrenia. The fragmentation of the lines mirrors the fragmentation of the self. It is a cry for help, the crowd murmured. Sympathetic nods rippled through the room. They weren't looking at me. They were looking through me. Victor placed a thick leather folder on the table in front of me. He opened it to reveal 2 documents. On the left, a durable power of attorney, granting him total control over my finances and decisions. On the right, voluntary commitment papers for a private facility in Switzerland. The choice is yours, Valerie, Victor whispered, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Sign the power of attorney, and we handle this as a family. Refuse, and Dr. Aris is prepared to sign an involuntary hold. The transport team is waiting in the driveway. It was a perfect checkmate. Sign away my freedom, or be dragged out screaming, proving his point that I was insane. I looked past Victor to my brother, Julian. He was sitting 2 seats away, sweating through his tuxedo. He knew the debt wasn't mine. He knew I was sane. He knew our father was a monster. Julian, I said, my voice steady. Tell them. Tell them who actually owes the money. The room went dead silent. Julian looked up, his eyes darting between me and Victor. For a second, I saw a flicker of conscience. Then Victor cleared his throat, a low, growling sound. Julian flinched. He looked down at his plate. Just sign it, Val, he muttered, his voice shaking. You're sick. Dad is just trying to help. Don't make a scene. The betrayal didn't hurt like a knife. It hurt like a suffocation. My own brother was selling me out to save his skin. Poor girl. A woman in diamonds whispered behind me. She's completely delusional. I looked at them, my father. The architect of my destruction. My brother. The coward. My stepmother, Elena, watching with a bored smirk. They weren't a family. They were a syndicate, and the time for mercy had just expired. You're right, I said, my voice projecting clearly. I should sign. Victor handed me a heavy gold fountain pen. He smiled, the victory already tasting sweet in his mouth. He thought he was watching a surrender. I gripped the pen. It felt cold and solid. It didn't feel like a writing instrument. It felt like a weapon. I leaned over the document. The tip of the pen scratched against the paper. A harsh, final sound in the quiet room. I didn't hesitate. I signed with a flourish, the ink glistening under the chandelier light. Victor snatched the document from the table before the ink was even dry. He held it up like a trophy, a grin spreading across his face that was pure, unadulterated greed. He turned to the crowd, opening his mouth to announce his victory, to tell them that his poor, broken daughter was now safely under his care. Then his eyes dropped to the signature line. His smile faltered. He squinted, bringing the paper closer. The silence in the room shifted from anticipatory to confused. Valerie Stone? He read aloud, his voice thick with irritation. Who is Valerie Stone? And why did you write? He stopped. His face went gray. He looked up at me. And for the first time in 29 years, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Chief Federal Prosecutor, he whispered. RICO Division? I stood up. I didn't push my chair back. I didn't smooth my dress. I just rose, shedding the skin of the victim I had worn for him. That is my legal name, Father, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. And this isn't a family dinner. It's a sting operation. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Taylor dropped her wine glass. It shattered, but no one looked at the mess. They were looking at me. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small, black remote. You spent the evening mocking my art, I said, pointing at the massive screens surrounding us. You called it chaotic. You called it the product of a broken mind. You brought a doctor here to diagnose me based on these scribbles. I pressed the button. On every screen in the ballroom, the images shifted. The chaotic swirls of red and black didn't disappear. They untangled. The jagged lines straightened. The abstract blobs resolved into nodes. The art wasn't art. It was data. You were looking at your own ledger, Victor, I said, cold and clear. I pointed to the center screen. That red spiral? That's the flow of laundered money from your shell companies in Panama. The black jagged lines? That's the shipping route your logistics subsidiary uses to traffic undocumented labor through the port of Newark. And those white bursts you laughed at? Those are the bribes you paid to state senators. The room erupted. Guests were standing up, scrambling for their phones, realizing they were standing inside a crime scene. I didn't paint chaos, I told him, leaning over the table until I was inches from his face. I painted your prison. Victor stumbled back, knocking his chair over. You can't. You're my daughter. I'm a federal prosecutor, I corrected. And you have the right to remain silent. From the back of the room, Senator Thorne, the man Victor had been trying to impress all night, stepped forward. He wasn't smiling. He reached into his tuxedo jacket, but he didn't pull out a cigar case. He pulled out a badge. Victor, Thorne said, his voice carrying the weight of the federal government. I'm not here for the merger. I'm here for the arrest. The doors burst open. This time, it wasn't catering staff. It was a tactical team. Jackets emblazoned with FBI. Dr. Aris tried to run toward the kitchen, but a federal agent tackled him before he made it 3 steps. My stepmother, Elena, let out a shriek as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Julian sat frozen, staring at the screens, watching his gambling debts displayed as data points in a federal indictment. Victor stood alone in the center of the chaos, the power of attorney document crumpling in his hand. He looked at me, pleading. Valerie, he gasped. I'm your father. You made it very clear I was just a limb, I said. And this is me cutting you off. The handcuffs clicked around Victor's wrists. The sound echoed in the stunned silence of the ballroom. It should have been the end. It should have been the moment he lowered his head, begged for mercy, or screamed in denial. Instead, Victor Stone started to laugh. It began as a low chuckle and rose to a bark of genuine amusement. He looked at Senator Thorne, then at the agents holding his arms, and finally at me. He didn't look like a man who had just lost everything. He looked like a man who had been waiting to play his favorite card. Wait, he told the agents. His voice was calm, authoritative. Check my inside jacket pocket. Don't move. An agent barked. Check the pocket, Victor repeated, his eyes locked on mine. Or you'll miss the part where your chief prosecutor destroys her own life. Thorne nodded once. An agent reached into Victor's tuxedo jacket and pulled out a folded, heavy document. Give it to her, Victor said. The agent handed me the paper. I unfolded it. My blood ran cold before I even finished reading the header. The document was a 10-year-old promissory note for $40 million, issued by a cartel shell company. At the bottom was my forged signature. Victor admitted it casually. I was 19 and away at college. so he used my clean record to guarantee a massive loan. With a smug smile, he told me to read the default clause. If he went bankrupt or was arrested, the entire debt would fall on the guarantor me. I instantly understood the consequences. A federal prosecutor suddenly owing cartel money would be suspended, disbarred, financially frozen, and professionally ruined. Even if I proved forgery, I would lose everything long before a judge cleared my name. Victor leaned across the table, triumphant, and gave his ultimatum. Drop the charges and let him walk, or he triggers the default and destroys my career. Julian gloated. Senator Thorne paled. He knew the law. Victor thought he had me checkmated, but he forgot his own history. I took out another file, a court order from 12 years earlier, when my mother died and he fought to seize my inheritance by having me declared mentally incompetent. He kept that order active for 3 years, long enough to drain every dollar and control my life. And during those years, specifically, when I was 19, he signed that loan in my name. A contract signed by a legally incompetent person is void from the start. The loan was never guaranteed by me at all. Victor collapsed as the trap reversed. Julian went white when I pointed out the final clause. Without a valid guarantor, the debt transfers to the next family beneficiary. He now owed $40 million to the cartel. Agents dragged Victor away. Julian screamed for protection. Elena and Taylor were detained for questioning over the shell companies. No one shouted insults anymore. They were terrified. I took Victor's chaos art off the wall as the agents dismantled the room. Outside, I tossed it into my trunk. It wasn't evidence, it was a trophy. Driving away, I realized the truth. Victor spent his life trying to own people, shaping me into a signature he could use. But the cage he built cracked under the weight of his own greed. I didn't rip the loan up or negotiate. I buried him with the law he taught me to fear. For the first time, I had no debt, no family, and a name that belonged to me alone. If you've had to become someone else just to survive your family, this story is yours too. You are not alone.